Martin Luther King memorably said, "Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." I'm calling this episode an inescapable network of mutuality. I recently returned from a Southern civil rights tour, and actually, to me, tour is not the right word. Pilgrimage is more like it. This was hosted by the Telos Group, Telos. I highly recommend all of their pilgrimage excursions. They go to Israel, Palestine, they go to the US South. They've got one in Northern Ireland that I participated in 2024. This was my first time going on their US Southern civil rights pilgrimage. So we started in New Orleans and we went to the Whitney Plantation. We learned all about the importation of enslaved human beings through New Orleans, and we went to the Whitney Plantation, which is a preserved plantation of slavery. Um, then we went to Jackson, Mississippi, where I used to live. So it was a bit of a homecoming, but I got to do a couple of things I've never done before. One of them was to go to the Medgar and Murley Evers home, which was right there in Jackson, but I'd never actually been. And in my latest book, The Spirit of Justice: True Stories of Faith, Race, and Religion, I open the book with a story about Murley Evers and some quotes by her. So going there was a very spiritual and powerful experience for me to be in the home of this woman and her husband who I've so recently written about, who I've sat with their stories for so long. Also in Jackson, we went to the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. We also heard from local activists. Then we went to Selma in Alabama. And this was another first for me. I walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Of course, that is the site of Bloody Sunday, which took place in 1965. So this year, 2025, marks the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And I got to make that trek. And I was praying the whole time and just trying to take it in. And then we ended up in the city of Montgomery. And of course, we go to the Lynching Memorial and Museum, which is created by the Equal Justice Initiative, headed up by Brian Stevenson. Now, I had been to both of them before, but I went on the opening weekend at the grand opening. And so since then, they've moved and expanded the museum. And go. Please, would you just go? If you haven't been there yet, it is absolutely high time. You could even make it for your spring break. It is that important, I think, to get an understanding not just of the history, but in the museum they clearly state slavery evolved. So what they do a powerful job of is connecting the dots between race-based chattel slavery and the slave trade to the present day and the crisis of mass incarceration. Um, so we went there, and that was incredible. But also, we got this really in depth tour of the city of Montgomery by one of the most dynamic tour guides I've ever had. And we also got to go to the parsonage where Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, and their children lived during his first pastorate at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And he was the pastor there when the Montgomery bus boycott took place, and that catapulted him to national prominence. So it was so powerful being at his home and standing right outside of it. But what was most important about this trip is not where we went, but who we were with. So this particular trip was unique because it intentionally included 4 Palestinian Christians. These are scholars, these are activists, and they are all affected, even devastated, by the genocide happening in their homeland. So we got to know each other over the course of a week, hours and hours on the bus, walking through these incredibly powerful historical monuments and museums. And in those conversations, the most frequent refrain, plea, demand was, why aren't more Christians in the United States speaking up for us? Why won't more Christians be more public and vocal in their protest of the destruction of Gaza and its people? I felt indicted. I felt convicted. I've written several articles about this on my Substack. I've shared on social media. I lived in Israel, Palestine for a semester in college, so I have much more exposure than most people beyond the headlines. And so I should have known better, and I could have been doing so much more. So after long conversations, laughter, and lament with these Palestinian Christians, I vowed to be more committed in my solidarity. And this experience is what reminded me of that MLK quote: "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And as I say this, I'm holding this small cross given to me by one of the Palestinian Christians. Of course, it's made out of olive wood. And it's a reminder of that inescapable network of mutuality that we have with all people, and especially the Palestinians in this moment. Now, that experience was combined with the news of Muhammad Khalil's plight. And because I had this experience, hearing about this news story hit different. So, to recap, this is a summary from the Associated Press. On March 8th, federal immigration authorities arrested a Palestinian activist who played a prominent role in Columbia University's protests against Israel, a significant escalation in the Trump administration's pledge to detain and deport student activists. Mahmoud Khalil, a graduate student at Columbia until this past December, was inside his university owned apartment Saturday night when several immigration and customs enforcement agents, ICE agents, entered and took him into custody. Now, understand that Mahmoud Khalil is a permanent resident with a green card, so he is legally here. The article goes on to say that Khalil's arrest is the first publicly known deportation effort under Trump's promised crackdown on students who joined protests against the war in Gaza that swept college campuses last spring. The administration has claimed participants forfeited their rights to remain in the country by supporting Hamas. They also threatened Khalil's wife, an American citizen who is 8 months pregnant. What is the import of this? The detention of a legal permanent resident who has not been charged with a crime marked an extraordinary move with an uncertain legal foundation, according to immigration experts. So understand what's happening here. They are criminalizing protest. They are criminalizing solidarity. They are tossing out the First Amendment and the right to speak out against stuff you disagree with in politics, in the government, in society. It's about free speech. It's about the right to protest peacefully. And that is being stolen in front of our very eyes. Mahmoud Khalil, whose whereabouts we weren't even sure of the first couple of days, is now being detained in Louisiana, where I just was, which has the highest per capita rate of incarceration in the US. He dictated letter over the phone. And this is what he said. He said, "My arrest was a direct consequence of exercising my right to free speech as I advocated for a free Palestine and an end to the genocide in Gaza, which resumed in full force Monday night. With January's ceasefire now broken, parents in Gaza are once again cradling two small shrouds, and families are forced to weigh starvation and displacement against bombs. It is our moral imperative to persist in the struggle for their complete freedom." Khalil goes on to say, The Trump administration is targeting me as part of a broader strategy to suppress dissent. Visa holders, green card carriers, and citizens alike will all be targeted for their political beliefs. In the weeks ahead, students, advocates, and elected officials must unite to defend the right to protest for Palestine. At stake are not just our voices, but the fundamental civil liberties of all. And then he closes his statement with a note of how these policies hit at a personal level. He said, knowing fully that this moment transcends my individual circumstances, I hope nonetheless to be free to witness the birth of my firstborn child. We are in an inescapable network of mutuality. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. And we hear of Mahmoud Khalil's plight at the same time as we hear of a similar but even bigger instance of illegal detention for the exercise, well, actually, for no reason at all. Listen to this. Um, the Trump administration has flown 238 Venezuelans to an El Salvador prison that human rights groups say is designed to disappear people. Listen to that again. Designed to disappear people. What we're looking at, folks, is not only unlawful arrest, unlawful detention, but making people go away as if they were never there and we can't do anything about it. They are secretly moving people like Khalil. They are secretly deporting people, even though we know of this now. They're doing it in such a way that it's too late to intervene before something horrible happens. Disappearing people is something that authoritarian regimes do. And it's supposed to be something that they do in other countries, not in the land of the free and the home of the brave. So not only can it happen here in the United States, it is happening here in the United States right now. And if they're coming for them, they can come for you too. But let me go on. This is despite a judge's order temporarily blocking the move. The US government flew more than 200 men that it had accused of gang membership to the quote terrorism confinement center, or CCOT, which is a draconian mega prison that has become central to the promise of the Salvadorian president Nayib Bukele promised to rid his country of crime. Do you understand the implications of this? This was despite a judge's order. This is a violation of the constitutional separation of powers and the reason why we have three branches of government, and that the executive branch is not supposed to be above the law and above the judicial branch. A judge said, turn the planes around, and they refused. And furthermore, the uh, El Salvadoran president tweeted out, oopsie, too late. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, retweeted it. So they're gleefully defying court orders, gleefully breaking the law, gleefully disregarding law and order. There's an article that goes on to say, but because of this constant blackout, there's no phone, mail, or visits in this Supermax prison in El Salvador. There's so many people wondering about their loved ones who have no way to confirm if they're living. Our understanding is that there's almost no medical access or access to medications in any sort of regular or consistent way. And reports from Amnesty International and Cristosal found that in Salvadoran prisons overall, there's systemic torture. It is a regular, institutionalized practice, which means the US government knowingly sent more than 200 people who had not been credibly accused nor had anything proven in a court of law to a place of torture in another country in defiance of a judge's express order. These unlawful detentions are coming for me, and they're coming for you if you choose to stand for justice in this moment. These arrests and incarceration are designed to squash any speech or action deemed as dissent against this political regime and its interests, both domestically and internationally. We cannot see the genocide in Gaza, the unlawful arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, the illegal deportation of more than 200 men without any evidence of wrongdoing as isolated events that are detached from our own personal circumstances. If they will do it to some, they will do it to anyone. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, what can we do? First of all, recognize this inescapable web of mutuality that to the extent that we do not stand up for justice for people who are being othered right now, we are inviting the same injustices upon ourselves. So first thing we need to do is recognize that we what happens to one happens to all, and that we can't isolate and separate and atomize injustices, because what they're doing is they're pushing the boundaries in one area to see what they can get away with, what will people allow. And once they know they can get away with it here, in the cases that seem at arm's length, they'll do it much much closer to home, and it will affect you and the people you love sooner or later, likely sooner. Other things we can do, especially in terms of the situation in Gaza and with Palestinians. I listened to this podcast. It's called Across the Divide. It's a whole podcast with multiple episodes. It's hosted by one of the Palestinian Christians who was on that Southern Civil Rights pilgrimage with us. I'll put the links in the article and the show notes here, but it's called Across the Divide podcast. The other thing is stay tuned both here and on their podcast for more information about a conference in the US about Palestine. Um, According to the information that I have, the conference is for Christians who find themselves at a pivotal moment, grappling with the implications of the injustices in Palestine and seeking a path toward Christ centered justice. Since October 2023, more evangelicals are awakening to the realities in Palestine, Israel, recognizing how certain theologies, church teachings, and political alliances have fueled injustice. This conference seeks to harness that reckoning into meaningful action, equipping believers with biblical, theological, and practical tools to engage in peacemaking and justice work. Now, this is still in the early planning phases, so I will have the website and registration details forthcoming, but it'll be this fall, and stay tuned for more information about it. In addition, read this statement. It's called A Call for Repentance, an open letter from Palestinian Christians to Western church leaders and theologians. An open letter from Palestinian Christians to Western church leaders and theologians. I'm putting the link to that statement here. And then, most of all, know that whatever affects one affects all. That the same illegal, anti democratic, and authoritarian tactics they're now using on Palestinians and immigrants is coming for you too. This is an attack not only on democracy, but on solidarity as well.